Okay, so welcome to the.
Third episode of Not So Sugar Coated.
So we have some very special guest speakers today. We have Jen and Jason.
Identify yourselves in the microphone, please.
Hello, I am Jason.
I'm Jennifer.
Okay, and we've actually known you guys. How long have we known you guys?
Since at least 2008.
Back in the Access days.
So how many years is that?
I started interning in 2008.
Okay.
I was going to say, because you guys went to New York in 2008, right?
Yeah, 2009, because I did Guatemala and New York, and then the following year was Maine
Yeah.
and
I went
Guatemala.
to Maine.
So, it was, 2008 was when I started the internship.
Like 14 years?
Sure.
Almost 15.
Something like that. It's been a long time.
That is a long time.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yep. So we are here because we talked about our infertility story, but Jen and Jason have also an infertility story that's crazy cool. That's all I can say. So I don't know where you guys want to start. Do you guys want to start in the beginning from like how you guys met or when you guys decided to have kids? Like where do you think your story starts?
I mean, probably at the beginning, really, because that's kind of what sets the tone for
Usually
all
where
of it.
stories start.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Sometimes they start at the end.
Sometimes.
And they go back to the beginning.
It's true.
And they go back to the end, then to the middle, and then back to the end.
Oh dear. Yeah, so we met in 2003, right after I graduated. Jason actually gave me my interview at PetSmart.
I was a manager at the time. And we were doing open interviews. So
That's how I met him. I actually walked back out to the car and said I was going to marry him someday, and my friend thought I was crazy. So, but
Wait, hold on. Did you hire her because
no. He was actually dating someone, and I didn't know that. And he was just the initial manager of like weeding people out, saying this person would be interesting. You should interview them.
Okay.
And then the store manager hired me, but I had already determined I was going to marry him. So that sounds probably weird, but there we are. Here we are, almost married for. We've been together for almost 20 years, and it was 17 years of marriage this year.
yep. I'm glad you struggled with that. So I can
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
So we got married in 2006. And at that time, we said we were going to wait to have kids, like the 5-year plan, kind of standard. And leading up to that, my cycles had always been very regular, pretty much clockwork, could tell you when it was going to happen. So it was pretty surprising when like a month after we got married, my period was late. And it was like, oh, this is odd. Did we get pregnant? Because it's like the natural thought process. So get a pregnancy test, it's negative, and the next day my period shows up and I'm like, oh, okay, that was weird. But that happened the next month, but it was like a couple extra days late. And then the next month it was like even like a week late. And so finally by September, I was like, I should probably go to the doctor and like just see what they have to say about this, because this is unusual. And without realizing, things like changing in your mind, all of a sudden, like you start entertaining the thought of being pregnant in those days. So where it was, nope, no kids for 5 years. Now it's like, well, maybe it wouldn't be so bad to have a kid. And so then we go to the doctor, do all of the testing, blood work, ultrasounds, whatever, to see what's going on. And they gave, the official diagnosis that you have PCOS. So, when I asked questions about that, they were like, well, here's your 2 options. They didn't really give me answers of like much about PCOS or what it is, the polycystic ovarian syndrome, for anybody who doesn't know PCOS.
What does it
PCOS
do?
is polycystic
men.
ovarian syndrome. So or for women who don't know, though I suppose most probably do, but basically it's like hormone imbalances and cysts growing on ovaries. And the hormone imbalances and stuff can be obviously quite problematic when you're, trying to have a body functioning properly or producing a child. It's also apparently related to like pre-diabetes, which I didn't realize, because the options that they gave me to deal with it were birth control or it was metformin, which is actually a drug for diabetes. And I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So it was, do you want to have kids? You're going to take metformin. If you don't want to have kids, birth control. Those were the two options they gave me. That's really the only information that they gave me in the office. And at that point, we had kind of said, well, maybe we would like to have kids. Let's just let it happen naturally and see what happens. So I did the metformin just to get my cycle like rolling. Went back to normal. Like it was like, you know, clockwork again. So thought we'd fix the problem. And at that point, well, we still didn't get pregnant. So I started reading, you know, I'm a researcher. That's what I do. And just started reading stuff. Well, at the time, we're talking 17 years ago, there was far less information available than there is today. And so it was a lot of forums and like trying to just figure out information of like what's worked for people. It came down to like diet, things like that. So we kind of started venturing in that a little bit without really too much information and just still trying to wait and say, oh, we'll get pregnant. It will happen. It's not that big of a deal, but it didn't.
How long do you guys think you guys tried like the whole like we'll see what happens naturally kind of way?
That's a good question.
I would say it was probably a solid 3 years.
Wow.
Because I think I just kept holding out that it would happen. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it wasn't, nowadays it's talked about like, you know, if you haven't gotten pregnant in that first year, there might be something going on that you should check out.
Yeah.
That's really more common knowledge than it was 17 years ago.
Yeah.
And so I kept thinking it's going to happen, but it's okay that it didn't happen. You know, we're still living our life. We're okay. But when I started the internship at church and people were getting pregnant all around me, that it really started to bother me because I was like, gosh, what is wrong?
Yeah.
Like I started asking that question because then I was exposed to more pregnancies and the desire started to grow more of like actually wanting a child instead of just like, oh, if it happens, it happens. And so it was probably that first 3 years when it just was like in the back of my mind versus like, no, I actually want to have a baby.
Yeah.
And so I think that's when it shifted for me was then. So probably it was between 2 and 3 years, I think. So
What were you thinking, Jason, those 3 years?
I had this little joke for a while that at first it was funny to me, but after, you know, everything we went through, it got kind of old. And just trying, I had this saying that, you know, this is the only time in life you can have fun failing.
Oh.
It's like, yeah, we're having all kinds of fun together, but, you know, we're not getting pregnant at all. So for me, that was almost like a way to cope with it.
Yeah.
But then after a while, you know, like Jen said, we had so many years of not getting pregnant. That's when, you know, questions in my mind started to raise up. Like, okay, so what's going on? Like, is it her? Is it me? Is it a combination of the two? Like, what's really happening and why aren't we getting pregnant? So,
Yeah.
Did it bother you?
not at first.
I mean, I'm sure it didn't bother you as much as it did her. I mean, the
Yeah,
whole mother
yeah.
aspect, I feel like, is a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at first it really didn't. Like I said, as the years went on, it was, I wouldn't say it bothered me, it was more concerning. Because if there was a deeper issue, then, you know, what's that issue?
Yeah.
So, and if it isn't, it's something, can it be corrected? How do we correct it? So,
yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate. I know that I was the one bothered by it a lot.
Well, I feel like
Beginning.
society tells you that it's like 80% of the time it's the woman because she's the one carrying the child. Like, nobody ever thinks it's the guy,
Nope, but it's 50-50.
you know?
It's literally 50-50, and we found that out because we had issues. Actually, Jason dealt with more issues than...
so
Well, like you were saying.
But I do, I mean, but... Okay, go ahead.
But like what you were saying like you went to the doctor and you were the one getting all the testing done at the
Again.
beginning, you know? So you were thinking, oh, it's all me.
Right, because a lot of the outward signs end up being feminine, like female. Like
Yeah.
the female body shows outward signs more often than the male body. Like it, I mean, you can't, like you can't literally look at semen and go, oh, well, they're not all good swimmers. Like you can't do that.
She just crossed your
Well, you can't. You know, you have to have like a microscope to be able to look at stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
for a woman though, you start to have hormonal imbalances definitely show outwardly, or like your cycle's messed up or whatever. Like we can see those things so much easier.
And because when Bert got tested, they told us that men's sperm changes every 90 days.
Well, and I remember thinking when we were struggling, I remember thinking, my dad had a kid. My dad had kids. I came from my dad. Like, there can't be anything wrong with me. It's got to be her. Like, that was the thought process I had. Like, I'm my dad's son. Like, he had 3 kids. Like, can't be me. I can't have anything wrong with me. Like, what'd you do?
No, it is a weird thought because his family actually has infertility on their side of the family.
Yeah, my dad's side quite a bit. And not a lot of people know this. Just I can back up further on my side of the story to 2nd grade, where and I don't know why my parents waited so long, and to be extremely open and blunt about it. I had, which runs in my dad's side of the family, basically undescended testicles. So basically, my balls didn't drop for all these years. And in our research, we found out if the surgery is done, if the doctor's not careful doing the surgery, it can affect in a way.
Well, it's sometimes it's the timing of it too. Like if they wait too long, because then they're up in a too warm of a location, and it can actually damage the testicles' ability to create healthy sperm. And he was in 2nd grade, and the surgery is supposed to be done a lot sooner than that. So he had years where they were too warm. So there was potential damage from that.
Okay, so back up here.
Sorry, yes, okay.
I'm all like, wait.
How much further back do we go? Because that's in our research.
No, so they didn't tell you anything, right? Is that what you're saying? Until later on, your parents?
Yeah, I don't know if my parents just ignored it completely, but I went to the doctor for the yearly physical, and my pediatrician at the time was like, you have an issue here, like,
Okay.
you should have something there, and nothing's there. And so that's when I went to go see a specialist. And like, oh yeah, you have this problem. And then come to find out, the guys on my dad's side of the family dealt with the same type of issue. So, and it's my dad had me and his younger
But
brother.
Jason's a miracle baby.
Yes. My parents also struggled to get pregnant, and then when I was born, I did have umbilical cord wrapped around my neck.
Wow,
So
crazy.
Yeah, so there's a lot going against me from the start.
So the enemy was after you way before you were being out.
Yeah.
That's basically you can say. So they didn't say anything, and then you had to have corrective surgery.
Yeah.
How old were you when you had corrective surgery?
2nd grade. So how old is that? Like,
9.
Yeah.
Did you know that's what you were having?
yeah, I knew.
Okay.
I knew what I was going in for surgery for.
Oh, okay.
I was
His-
fully aware of it. So
Yeah, his parents just didn't whether they just didn't know to do anything, or they just thought it would correct itself, or what, that part we don't really know, which actually was a source of anger for me once I found out about it, because I was like mad at them for not doing it, because I thought, if this means we can't have babies because you didn't do that,
Yeah.
and I was angry about that for a while.
Yeah. And it's easy to be angry when something's not happening.
Right. Yeah.
Well, when you weren't in like middle school or high school where you had anything to compare to,
right.
like in the locker room when you're showering and stuff after gym class.
Yeah, right.
Like, 2nd grade, they didn't care about your the way you smelled. You just
No.
smelled like,
Right.
You're good. Go class.
that's a thing.
It is. And then, what age typically are you supposed to have that corrective surgery then?
I think it's before 2, isn't it?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they were really late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It should be caught pretty quick to have that done. So
Okay.
I mean, we have 2 girls, so we would know what to look at down there for
Our
a
boys
baby.
did not deal with that issue.
Yeah, but you prayed
So,
about that the whole time.
We sure did. We did. Yeah.
Cancel that.
Really get stops here. No. Yes. Yes, they did not. They're very, very healthy. So
All right. So, when you found out after the 3 years, I guess after that.
Okay. So I guess I started, we changed how we were eating, and just, I don't know, the practical things that you can do, right? You can change the way you're eating. You can take some supplements, things like that, exercise, not go in hot tubs, not ride bikes, those kinds of things. I mean, literally, we haven't really been on bike rides in a very long time.
Not use seat warmers.
Like we went,
Were you ever on birth control?
I did before we were married. Well, I guess we're just going to be raw because, obviously we were promiscuous before marriage, but there was a couple of short stints where I did utilize birth control leading up to our wedding. And it was because I thought, oh, if I start now, then we'll be good to go. But I actually had negative reactions. And so I didn't stay on anything. I tried two different things, reacted both to those, and then that was it. And then never did it again.
That was something that the doctor was telling you was, oh, you're on birth control too long. It's going to take more time before you get pregnant.
Which there is truth in that because your body has to regulate. So it depends on the person, how it affected your body. There is some truth to that. So
I could see why you would question it being you, the whole time, thinking it was all on you to be the reason why you didn't get pregnant.
Right. Well, and I think because culturally or society says often that it's the woman. So you start there. That's where a lot of people start. And, they'll test the sperm and stuff and things and just double check. But that's usually about as far as they'll go with men at the very beginning. But I feel like you should go a little deeper sometimes because anyway, we can dive into that. But we did do that later on. But after that first 3 years, we actually started going to like a more natural doctor. I'd kind of learned about him, and I just said, well, we might as well just go and see if he can help with anything, because the regular doctors weren't helping. They didn't really offer us any solutions. And so we decided to go to like a more natural doctor and just see if he could help with anything. And so we ended up on, different supplements, and I couldn't even remember all the things that he did because it was pretty in depth of what we did, and it was just different, protocols.
We were on a lot of supplements for a while.
We were on a lot of stuff.
So were we. That's why I'm laughing. We can all relate.
Yes, it's the natural pharmaceutical world, right? Like it's supplements. But they work a lot. They help the body a lot. But it was, we saw a lot of benefits to being on that, though we didn't end up pregnant. The cool part, this is a big part of our story, is that I had started learning about healing. So through the internship at church, which I guess I was in the intern for the college ministry at the church. And one of the things that the pastor who oversaw that had us do was go through all of the healing classes. And that was really impactful for me, hugely impactful, because I guess I grew up, in a church that did healing majorly. And so I knew it, but like, it's different when you're an adult and you've chosen to follow the Lord and you start learning about those things. So I was in these classes, and it was like just a whole world blown up for me of like healing. And I got so hungry for Jesus. I just went home and like, I would stay up till 2:00 in the morning reading the Gospels over and over and over because I couldn't get enough of it. And at some point, I remember staying late. I was having a conversation. It was actually with Dan. And we had this conversation. I don't remember. We were talking about healing and like, how big is God? Like what could he do? And something snapped in me. And I was like, oh my gosh, he is a big God. Why have I never asked him to heal me? And that was Thursday night. And I knew that I would be going to church on Sunday and I would be having Pastor Dean pray for me, and he was going to pray and I was going to be healed. Like that was it. And it was it's so funny, like looking back at it, because on Sunday morning when I woke up, I knew I was going to church, but my alarm didn't go off. Mm-hmm. I overslept. I ended up in traffic. Mm-hmm. I literally almost missed him. I was running through the sanctuary like, Pastor Dean, because I needed him to lay hands on me and pray for me. And he was like walking out of the building, and I was like, no. And Jason's like, wait, what are we doing? Like, oh my gosh.
What was so special about him? Not that they're...
Yeah. Why him not? Because Pastor Dean, the way that he believed and taught healing was so impactful to me that I knew that he believed that it was possible. Mm-hmm. And I needed that. I needed that faith that someone was like, yeah, God's going to do this for you. Getting to know Pastor Dean. And in fact, after several years, like he was my spiritual grandpa. That's what we call him. And like, I was his, granddaughter. Like that's kind of where that ended up. But there was something he was just like highlighted in my mind. I knew that I needed someone who had the same faith that I had in that moment. And I felt like the woman, who touched Jesus' garment. That's how I felt. And so I told him, I'm like, I need you to pray for me. I need healing. And he was like, oh yeah, let's do that. And he literally started praying. And well, actually, I think he kind of started telling us a story. And then all of a sudden he stopped. And he was like, his whole face, literally mid-sentence, he just stopped. His whole countenance changed. And he looked at me, he's like, put your hand on your belly. He's like, Jason, put your hand on her belly. And he goes, the Lord is healing your womb right now.
Wow.
He's like, you are going to have a child and it's going to happen naturally. Just started bawling my eyes out. And then he literally stopped and continued his story like he had never stopped. And I was like crying. And I'm like, I can't even listen to your story right now. What did you just say to me? And I was like, oh my word. And so that was probably in like 2009, I think that happened, like close to Christmas. I have it written down.
Did you guys ever explore IVF and all that?
We did down the road. So this happened.
We'll get to that.
But
I didn't know if that thought had entered your mind prior.
not until later. Not until later. And that was kind of a journey in and of itself, because walking faith out is kind of a whole it's a whole process, man. And there's a lot about it that I think we don't understand. And when you're in a journey like that, you kind of have to explore, like, you know, the people who walked faith out biblically, you know. So like Abraham and stuff, he was a big one for me. He was the father of our faith, but like Ishmael came out of that, right? And I was like, okay, so I can make mistakes too. Like, it's okay. I can have moments, because, you know, walking faith out is hard.
It is hard. And let me just say this. I freaking hate the Abraham story.
I mean, yeah, but it's
Like, every time that like people knew that we were struggling and stuff like that, well, look at Abraham. And I wanted to be like, screw Abraham. I'm not waiting that many years.
no. That part is frustrating. But like looking
I would get really mad, like genuinely like upset.
No, I wouldn't want someone to throw that in my face. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But for me, like looking at how he walked out his faith walk,
for sure.
that was impactful, because he didn't do it perfect.
No.
And that was like, because people would be like, oh, well, if you have a moment of weakness, you're not standing in faith. And I'm like, well, I'm human. Like, there are moments when I'm like, okay, God, I really don't understand. This is frustrating. Like, I'm really angry.
Yeah.
And the reality is that God can handle that. And we need to be honest with him. He already knows. He already knows what you're feeling, but you need to be able to be honest. And I had to experience that, because I got this prophetic word, right? And so I thought for sure that December I was pregnant. Thought for sure I was pregnant. I was like, no, God just said that. Yeah. We got pregnant, but we were not pregnant. And that was a really hard January for me.
And also, I want to say this, because, you know, when somebody receives the word, we are in a society where we think instantly that's going to happen. Like, especially when people tell us these stories and these miracle babies. Oh yeah, when then, you know, like a month later and we were pregnant, and you're like, where am I in this? Like, when does it happen for me? Why didn't it happen for me? And it's a very frustrating part, you know. But like you said, with Abraham, you know, God promises something, but it didn't happen overnight.
No, it was
and
years.
people don't talk about that story enough.
Right. I mean, not to say that God can't do that, but there's, you know, people like us, you know, have to walk it out and just trust in him, you know.
I mean, he can and does do instant miracles.
Right, he can.
But
That's
oftentimes, miracles are a process,
Yeah.
and we miss that part. And faith is a process. And there's something in the waiting that God wants to teach us. And we often miss that because we get so caught up in trying to control it.
Yes.
That we miss the process and the learning and the waiting.
I'm a control freak, so yes.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I had to figure that out.
Yeah.
It took me like 7 years and out of the 10. And I was like, oh, I see what's going on here.
Well, and I think not everybody realizes the process that they took to get to their instant miracle. Like, you know, yeah, it happened instantly, but like, what did you do for the 5, 7, 10 years leading up to the instant miracle that you got?
Right.
You know, because I don't think it necessarily always happens like that.
Right. I mean, I've definitely seen instant miracles, but, you know, especially in the mission trips that I went on in Brazil, there were a lot of instant miracles. But I feel like the majority of the things that happen in life are not those.
No.
They're the ones that take time and a process to get through, where the Lord has us waiting for some reason. Or sometimes it takes action, like healing takes action too. Like there's like that story in the Bible where he tells him to go wash in the dirty river. And we're like, what? But like, it took faith. He had to go believe that he had to go in there. It was like 7 times he had to bathe in that river. And then he came out clean. And it's like, there's action sometimes in healing too. And so,
Or when you spit in the dirt.
yes, like there's an action sometimes that follows it. It's not
Take
always,
this mud. Right. You won't be blind anymore. Oh, no thanks.
Yeah, right.
I'll take my chances.
yeah. So yes, that was like that part of, I don't know, our journey. I don't think he fully understood how I was feeling in that moment. But that was something in our marriage, was like learning how to navigate that. Like when it's hard for one person, it's usually not hard for the other person in that moment, and you can support each other. That's kind of what we found, was like we didn't usually have down moments at the same time. I had the majority of them, and I think it wasn't as hard for you until the end, but those moments he would just be there for me. Like, okay, I don't really know how to help you other than just like,
Yeah, how were you navigating when she would have? I mean, honestly, outbursts of probably anger and sadness. I mean, I don't know.
Depression.
Yeah,
Well, for me and for most men, like we want to be able to fix everything, right? Like we're the fixer. So, not being able to fix a problem was just like, you're just dumbfounded. And knowing that, you get a level of sadness on yourself. Like, I don't know how to make this better. I don't know what to say. Do I bring you flowers? Will that help? Like,
Yeah.
but ultimately it's like you're just like sitting back, just wondering what's going on. So that brings a little bit of sadness and depression on you. So it wasn't easy. And then, I remember the days, when we were really in the process of trying to figure this out. Like I'd come home and she would just be like, down and out, depressed, crying, and I'm just like, I've got nothing. Like, you're kind of running out of energy. You're trying to figure out, why we're not getting pregnant. Trying to figure out, hey, God, you gave this word to us. How come it's not happening yet? Like, you just got 1,000 questions going in your head. So it gets frustrating, really. Then to kind of add to that, I do remember you had a period of time where, and I don't understand it. I'm sure you don't fully understand it. Where we'd be at church because we worked together there, right? And I remember you'd be like walking down the halls and you'd see someone and you'd be like, they're pregnant. Oh, yeah. And then like 2 weeks later, they'd be like, I just found out I'm pregnant. And like this would happen to her all the time. Mm. So that just compounded what she was going through emotionally.
yeah,
man, that was hard.
yeah.
That was, I don't even know. I don't understand that, but it's true. I actually kept a log of it.
Really?
Because I knew when people were pregnant, they'd be pregnant and they hadn't announced it yet, or they were about to be pregnant. And I was like, I just knew. I'd get in the car and I'd be like, hey, so-and-so was pregnant. And Jason's like, what? And then like a month or two later, they're like, yeah, we're pregnant. And I'd look at the date that I like wrote it down and I was like, oh my gosh. That's kind of
How
random, but
were you?
I would have been playing the lottery.
Were you like sad or happy, like when you found out when other people were pregnant like that?
it was both.
Okay.
Sometimes I was just plain angry. Mm-hmm. But most of the time it was both. Well, I was really happy for them, but I was also really sad that it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And kind of angry too, because I'm like, Lord, you told me that you were going to do this, and I just do not understand why it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
So someone told me this, like, it's like sitting under a Christmas tree, sitting at the Christmas tree and everybody's getting presents and they're opening them, but you haven't gotten yours yet. And you're just wondering, like, is there one under there for me?
Yeah.
But there is, you just haven't gotten it yet. And I was like, okay, that sounds cool, but like,
Give me my
it kind
baby.
of sinks though. Yeah.
Yeah.
My present already.
Yeah. So like, you're really
Yeah.
happy. You're like watching everybody, but like, you're also really sad and like questioning yourself a bit. Like,
Yeah.
Is this actually going to happen? Did I get forgotten?
Yeah.
Kind of what it felt like.
Well, you had that same type of thing too.
Yeah. I feel like I was kidding myself. Like, yeah, I was happy for the person, but I would try to disguise my sadness and anger, saying like, I'm not, like, every child is a blessing. So why would I be mad or why would I be angry? But then I would like burst out after the sixth person that I knew that was pregnant. I would like lash out.
Yeah, it's a.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh
but-
yeah, it totally does.
Sense, yeah.
Because you're. I mean, you're not being honest with yourself, so you're not really
No.
feeling those feelings, and so at some point
You're
you're
not
gonna
supposed to have those feelings towards a pregnancy.
Right. I actually had someone lecture me about that because I was like, I mean, honestly, it's painful, right? Like we want to be happy for people, but it is also very painful, and that's just honest. And someone was like, "Well, I've been through really painful things, and you should just be happy for people, or you're not their real friend." And I was like, "Okay, like I'm gonna ponder this for
not
a
your
minute."
friend anymore.
Right.
I was like, I said, well, I'm gonna ponder what she said
Yeah.
and see, like, because am I wrong? Like, am I wrong for feeling these feelings? Do I need to reevaluate? You know, and I still come to the same conclusion that like when you're in the middle of something like that, it can be, it just plain and simply painful.
Yeah.
You know,
I think the way I see it is like they're allowed to celebrate,
they are
and 100% they shouldn't tiptoe around you.
correct.
You know, but you're also allowed to. I think both things are true.
Exactly.
That's what it is, because my sister got pregnant and I could tell by her face that she was afraid to tell me.
Yeah.
And in my head, I was like, I don't want anybody to be afraid to tell me that they're pregnant, because every child is a blessing. It shouldn't be
Yes.
hidden or
Yeah.
anything like that, you know? So I was 100% happy, and I was not one bit angry or frustrated. I was just like, you know what? If it's not me, at least it's her. Cool, you know? But yeah, you're allowed to be, it was a little bit of a sting. Yeah, a little bit, but it wasn't bad either. I don't know how to explain it, but I think those two, you can have those two emotions.
You can.
So, yeah.
They can live simultaneously. You can be
Yeah.
both happy and sad, and they can live together.
Yeah.
And it's actually healthy and it's very human. And that was a lesson that I learned, because I feel like in society we have to be either happy or sad or angry or whatever, but like you can literally be all three of those at the same time.
Yeah.
And you can, and it's also like we're responsible for our own feelings, and we shouldn't have our experiences downplay someone else's experience.
Yeah.
And because like I had many people come to me, they're like, we just didn't know how to tell you, like we're pregnant. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, like seriously.
Yeah.
Like I'm really happy for you. Then I would go cry later,
Yeah.
not because I wasn't happy for them, because I was like, Lord, I'm really confused why that's still not me.
Yeah.
And so they're like, they're not,
They're not the
they
same
don't,
thing.
they're not the same thing.
No.
They're not, you know, you can, so that's why you can experience those things at the same time, but it can be very confusing, I think,
Yeah.
to experience them at the same time,
Yeah.
because they're big, they're kind of big emotions.
They are. I guess for the guys, did you guys feel anything when anybody was else pregnant? Because I think it's maybe different for guys. I have no idea.
I think for me, like in the beginning of our journey, when I find out someone was pregnant, I was happy for him. But as it went on, I actually had similar experience, like people kind of tiptoeing around me because they knew what we were going through. And I actually had one person, a coworker, say, I understand what you're going through. I have some news to tell you. I just want you to be okay with it. But we just found out we're pregnant, and I was very happy for them, and I may not have gone home and bawled my eyes out, but later the day I was like, dang, that's just, I'm happy for them, but I'm still, why not us type of emotion. So,
Yeah.
Which, let's think about it. Like Hannah was really sad and down when everybody else got pregnant, but she didn't. And I think it's very normal to like feel that way, right? Like to feel left out while still believing that you're going to have, your baby.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's just human.
Yeah. I think so too.
I think for me, I was just more like, it's not my problem. I didn't do anything wrong. So, like, I was under the impression that I was not the problem. So I was thinking, well, she was on birth control for how many years?
I don't even know.
5-6 years before we started trying to have kids. So I was like, it's going to take some time, whatever. Like, it didn't hit me as hard as it hit you, I don't think.
No. But I think you were too nervous about being a dad to care that I was like,
Yeah, that's
what do you call it? That I wasn't pregnant. I think his whole time he was, I don't want to fail as a dad. I don't want to fail as a dad. And so that was his biggest thing.
I think that feeling's natural for every guy, really. Like being, just.
I feel like it was unnaturally worried though.
So you were more like, if you get pregnant, great. if not, you'd be okay with that. That's kind of where you were at, really.
Yeah, I mean, we went to Maine on a mission trip, and we had those kids for a week, and I was like, what do I do with these kids? like, I don't know how to interact with kids. Like, the closest thing to kids were like my nieces and nephew, and like I didn't do anything when they were really babies in life, like,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for you is like wondering if you were going to be a good dad.
when we were on that mission trip in Maine, like,
Yeah.
we were with those kids all week, and I, the whole time I was like, am I doing a good job? Like, I don't know. And like, everybody was like, at the end of it, you were so good with the kids. Like, you're going to be such a good dad. I'm like, cool. Like,
Yeah.
I just remember, I can't remember the kid's name, but I just remember there was one kid that, like, while I was playing with him or something, he like fell and hit his head.
Oh no.
And he had like a really big bump on his head. And I was just like, I did that, like, that's my fault, So we were there, and like, this kid had this bump on his head.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a hat, so I gave him a hat and said,
I remember that.
like, here, keep this, like, and like, his face lit up, like, his whole demeanor changed, and like, he wore that hat like the rest of the time we were there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's okay.
I remember when that happened, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So,
You didn't go on that one, did you?
no, it did not.
so I just remember, like, I screwed up this kid I don't know. Like, what am I gonna do with my own, like, this,
Yeah.
like, I think I hit rock bottom, so maybe it can only go up from here. But like, my experience with kids was not
Yeah.
great. Like, I didn't ever
Yeah.
volunteer in the nursery, or like, look at kids and think, yeah, that's what I want someday. Like, I was always under the impression, like, yeah, I'll be a dad someday, and yeah, I'll have a boy, and like, it'll all be fine. And, like,
None of that happened, but
I was going to say, how's that working out?
You got girls.
we got 2 girls, and we're not having any more kids.
but we're happy.
But
I
yeah,
love
I
that.
couldn't be happier. So.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So, anyways, we were like, we keep sidetracking, but it's all good.
Well, that's true. Rabbit trails.
You said you were, what was it? Pastor Dean. Prayed for
other
you
year.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was 3 years of trying, and
And then,
That was
not
probably
trying.
more like 4 years in at
Okay.
that point, because like that around 3 years was when I got real serious about it, and so we'd been going to the natural doctor, for
Yeah.
probably close to a year at that point, and then Pastor Dean prayed for us,
Yep.
and then January was really rough because I wasn't pregnant, and then we had, it was about 7 years almost from the time that he gave that word to the time that Finn was born.
okay.
So it took a long time to see the fulfillment of that word, which obviously there are prophetic words that have taken even longer. Abraham's story is an example, but 7 years is still a long time to walk out. And
especially
considering I don't live as long as Abraham did, then,
Yeah.
7 years is probably equivalent, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I've actually always thought that, kind of like, so like Methuselah was 970 years
yeah,
old or something.
something like that.
I equate that to like being 97 now.
Yeah,
Like,
something.
Take a 0 off of whatever they. That's kind of how I always.
Yes, exactly.
that's how
So
I
like
always felt.
7 years was probably equivalent to like what
70?
that same thing.
That's
So
how I've always thought. I've never like openly
there it
said
is
that
now.
before,
Now
but,
it's
like,
going out into the
Yeah.
world. Like
It makes sense. You look like a 20-year-old for 100 years.
Yeah, just like how did they not look like wrinkly old raisins for like
Yeah.
700 years? Like,
I don't know.
was a year shorter?
Or maybe
then?
they
Like,
did look like wrinkly old raisins. We weren't there. We'll never know.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's not verifiable. But yeah, so it was a long time, and there was a lot of transformative and hard things that happened in that time. From continuing to just go to natural doctors and do the best things that we could. But that was also when I started to wonder, like, is there more going on that we should be looking into? Like, yeah, God killed my womb, but like, is there more that we should be looking at? Because this is still not happening, which I think is both healthy, and also there was also a part of that was control for me. So, and I didn't know it till later, but that was when we started to look at, like what's going on with Jason.
Started looking at fertility clinics.
Right. But we did start with you because, and it was really hard for me to do that because I was like, but no, God gave me this word and I want to stand in faith in that. Am I going to be not in faith if I go to a doctor and see if there's more going on, if I have more testing going on? Like, is that going to be going against like what God told me? And I had to come to a place where where it wasn't like stepping out of faith to just have more testing done, and as long as I was following peace, like as long as I had peace about everything that we did, I felt that I was still walking in faith. And so that's kind of where I had to come to this point where I was like, yeah, it's okay. We can go have some blood work done or, a test done or whatever. And that is where...
Well, because the church would tell you you're not living in faith.
Right. That's,
Your faith is little where, like, why are you not just trusting that it's going to happen?
Right, exactly. 'Cause I feel like it's that word of faith movement, right? Like you said it, you spoke it, your words have to align, and words are important. So I'm not downplaying that at all. Mm-hmm. But I feel like there's like a happy middle of like word of faith and still being able to walk things out at the same time while you're believing for something. Mm-hmm. And that was something that I had to kind of figure out because I was like, well, this doesn't, I should be okay to do this. Well, I did come to that place. But so we did end up having Jason go, and we found out that he had...
That's comfortable.
Yes. Okay.
Did you do that at the doctor's office?
He had to go to a urologist because...
We went to the fertility clinic first. Then they recommended the urologist, right?
No, the fertility clinic wasn't until later. You went to, I think, Dr. Dykstra first, just a normal family doctor. And because you had to start there in order to get, you have recommend for
good old U.S. healthcare there for you.
Yeah, you can't just go to the specialist. You have to go to another doctor to tell you that, you can go to the specialist.
No relation to us, by the way, this Dr. Dykstra. Right?
Yes.
No.
Because I get text messages every once in a while, like saying, "Hey, Dr. Dykstra, we'd like you to come do like."
Are you
this.
serious? I didn't know that.
They like text me and they'll be like, "We need you to come like be a," I don't know what he does, but something in like Texas or something or Florida.
I think there's a few Dykstra doctors though.
That cracks me up.
So I'm like,
I've gone to Dr. John Dykstra since I was in high school. He's a good family doctor, but
it's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that.
He went to there and then had to go to the urologist, and that appointment in the urologist's office was very awkward.
That was
for
very-
Did you go with him?
I did go with him.
It was very awkward.
Moral support.
Yeah.
It was very awkward because I go in the office and he introduces himself, but there's also a young girl in the room as well.
We did give permission because it was a student.
It was a
and
student.
We're like,
So-
oh yeah, that's fine. Not realizing
you got to learn this stuff somehow. So the doctor's asking us questions, and he goes, "Okay, I need to examine you now." I'm like, "Okay, no big deal." So drop trowel so he can examine me, and then I see this girl like, kind of avert her eyes, like I don't want. It's like, well,
Aren't you a doctor?
like you're studying to become a doctor, like. So it was a little bit of an awkward moment for. I didn't really care because it was a student.
yeah, you did because you actually had gone to school with her. We got in that elevator and he was like, "That was so awkward." So don't let it fool you.
Whatever.
well, and your wife
That's
isn't there.
worse. That is, what are the odds?
She might not have cared if you weren't in the room.
Maybe not, but maybe it's because she was like, "Oh my gosh, I know this guy. I went to high school with him," and then he's like dropping trowel, and then
Maybe she's like, "Man, what did I miss out on?"
This is like the best story ever. Because what are the odds?
oh my word. God, yeah, he was so embarrassed in the
It's
elevator.
better.
Okay. Yeah, keep going. This is your story. You're
My
the
story.
one.
Well, he did the exam, and he recommended I get an ultrasound done to make sure, things are okay. And luckily, the ultrasound tech was available, so I got an appointment. So I go in to have this ultrasound done, and I get brought into this room because they need to, take your pants off basically and raise this towel over you. And the ultrasound tech that comes in, I'm not kidding, is probably just as old as my grandma. So I'm like sitting there this whole time. She's like ultrasounding down in my crotch, like, "Oh, hey, grandma."
How do they ultrasound your... Okay, I'm sorry, but I gotta know because I know how a girl gets an ultrasound, but how does a guy get an ultrasound?
So the ultrasound device was almost like when a woman goes in, ultrasound, like just like on the stomach, like an.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it was like one of those.
Oh, so it's a lot nicer than for a woman. Vaginal?
Yeah, it's not one of those.
Yes, no, it's not.
Sorry, I didn't get it to know.
It's not an awkward internal ultrasound.
They developed a tiny little needle version of ultrasound to go in there.
That's cringe. But anyways.
No, so that alone was awkward. No,
I mean, it would be, yeah.
this old lady,
Yeah.
rooting around down there, this ultrasound tool. I'm like, good grief.
How's your day going? You're like,
Well, it was going good. But they discovered on my end that what's it?
A varicosal vein, basically, in the
So-
scrotum.
Well, there-
or was it?
no,
No, it's not in scrotum. It's like
so-
in the vein leading to it, or something that.
So the lower abdomen, there's all the blood vessels that supply blood down to your manhood, right? And sometimes that can get all tangled and balled up, which restricts blood flow. So I went in for surgery to fix that. So I've got 2 surgeries just to fix, issues on my end.
Well, and they told us, they're like, this may or may not work. And so I told them, I'm like, it's up to you if you want to do this. I'm not going to like make you have surgery or whatever. Like, they don't know that this is going to be the answer to our problems, but it might help. So I kind of left it up to him. I was like, you pray about it. And if you want to do it, like, that's up to you. So he did. He did end up
Yeah,
doing it.
I went through with it.
Did you feel pressure to do it or no?
Not really.
Okay. Well, I don't know, because, I probably would have pressured Bert. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
The control side of me would have pressured him to do it,
Yeah.
which sucks me saying that, but
I don't know why I didn't pressure him, because I feel like I did a lot of the control stuff, but for some reason I just really felt like I cannot pressure him to do this. It has to be his decision to do it. So I don't know why I didn't. I'm glad I didn't, because I wanted it to his
like you
decision.
said, like they told us, it might not work, but at the same time in my head, I'm like, but there's still a chance that this could help to some degree. So why wouldn't I go through it? So
okay. How long, does it take for you to recover for that?
Well, I mean, they cut through his abdomen to do it. So it wasn't like it was outpatient, but like they cut through the abdomen. So it was still.
yeah, I was out of work for a week, and then when I went back to work, I was on restricted, weightlifting, so there wasn't a whole lot I could really do. But as far as if that actually helped, my count, my numbers and all that, I don't know what that recovery time.
Well,
Could have
and I
been.
don't know that it directly ended up helping either, because so that was like one of the first things that we did. I had to go through other testing, and that's when they told me that there's nothing wrong with you. You are fine. And I knew, well, that's because God healed me. Like, there wasn't anything wrong with me at that point. God healed me. And so it was like, we just didn't understand, like, at that point why. So we did end up going to the fertility clinic and saw Dr. Dodds, and we did all of that testing, because we're like, okay, well, what else could possibly be going on? And that was, at that point, was probably 7 years into all of this was about, when we were, and so we're very used to this world now. And we did everything they wanted us to do. And a big part of that was the testing for Jason. And at that point, they told us that
Everything was wrong with me.
he was literally like 1% away from being considered sterile.
Okay.
With his sperm health. Because those are like the 3 things that they measure for that. And
Was it like volume, fertility, and
the motility,
Count and
ability. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. But anyways, the 3 things, and like one of them, and I can't remember off the top of my head which one, because you could have a lot of sperm, but if none of them are swimming or they're, deformed or something, they're not going to get through an egg. Like, that's just the reality. I can't remember. One of them can basically consider you, like, you could have sperm, but like, if that one is 0%, like, you're not going to get anybody pregnant. You're considered sterile at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, he was at like, it was like 1% or 2%. I think it was 1%.
yeah, they gave us 2 options to try.
They did. They told us they could do,
You do artificial insemination.
but they didn't. They told us that was going to be like a 3% chance of success. And I was like, well, then why would we do that? Like,
Yeah.
it was the IUI. And I was like, well, then why would we spend like that money and go through all that? It was like for 3%. Like, that doesn't even seem.
How much does that cost?
That one was only like $1,000. And I say only because IVF is like, for us, IVF, they also wanted to do the ICSI, which is basically where they put the sperm and the egg, like, I think together in the tray. I think that's what, I don't remember. I might be saying
Yeah,
that
they
wrong.
take sperm from me, egg from you, put them together basically in a petri dish.
It's like there's like that extra step in there versus like putting the sperm,
IVF?
yeah, but with the ICSI, the ICSI or whatever. Anyways, it was going to cost like $17,000, and they gave us less than a 50% chance at that age. And if we waited until we were a few years older, it was going to be even less. It was like 35%. And I was like, okay.
So how old were you during this?
I was in my 20s still. I don't remember. exactly how old I would have been at that point. I don't know. Maybe mid-20s.
I can't imagine how much it costs now with inflation.
Oh yeah.
Mid to later 20s, it had to be because we didn't have Finn until I was 31.
I only ask because
So,
as you get older,
maybe
it's
28.
harder to get pregnant.
Right.
So,
It can be, yeah, for
Supposedly.
sure.
Allegedly.
Yeah. Well, so we immediately left that appointment though, and we had an appointment with our natural doctor. And so we took the information about him, drove over to Dr. John, and we were like, okay, we've got this. Interestingly enough, I should back this train up though, because that same day that we went for that appointment about like, oh, your husband's basically almost sterile, we had a miscarriage at the beginning of the year. And it would be considered unconfirmed. And so it's not one that I talk openly about with, because a lot of people would tell you, oh, well, you never took a pregnancy test. You wouldn't know that. But like what happened, I know what happened. And I know that it was a miscarriage. So our technical of when you guesstimate your dates, our due date was the day that we had that appointment at that fertility clinic. So that day was like already a really rough day. And then they tell us that information. So that was a hard day. And so it was one of those moments when I like didn't feel feelings, and I was like, what can I do to fix this? And so it was like the control side of it came out. So we went to Dr. John and we're like, listen, we've got this information. How can you fix it? And I feel like in that moment, there was no faith for me in that moment. It was like, I have to take this in my own hands and like fix it. And so Dr. John did have some solutions that helped. And he put him on a bunch of supplements, and he started taking those things. And when they do it was like a couple months later, they do like a test again to see a follow-up. And his numbers had gone up from like that 1% all the way up to like 13% in just that couple of months. And the nurse was like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Yeah.
So it definitely was helping in the right direction.
Yeah.
It was. But what I came to the conclusion on, I cried a lot after that one, honestly. When I went to the Lord with it and I started praying about it, I told him, I was like, listen, like IVF is expensive. We do not have that kind of money.
Yeah.
So if this is the route you're going to go, which seems kind of odd to me because you told me we would have a baby naturally, and that doesn't feel natural. Not downplaying IVF, but it isn't the natural that I had. Like it to me, naturally means when a man and a woman come together and they make a baby intimately without the interference of a doctor having to help with that process.
Yeah.
That is what I envisioned in my head happening with that word. Like that's what I felt the Lord meant by that word.
Yeah.
And so IVF didn't feel like it fit that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, so if that's the route that you want us to go, you're going to have to make it darn clear, and you're going to have to give us that money. Cause it was like $17,000.
Yeah.
It was like just shy of 18,000 that we would have had to have. And so I was like,
not even a guarantee.
for not even a guarantee. That's a lot of money.
less than
And if you wanted to pay for 3 rounds up front, you could get like a discount on it.
10%.
I was gonna say, do you get buy two get one?
And it was like, well, it's kind of crazy. Yeah, so
still
it's
a
like if you
lot.
want to pay like 30 grand, basically,
Yeah.
like you can go through it 3 times, and
Yeah.
but then you also have to decide like, you know, paying for storing your, you know, eggs or you
Yeah.
know whatever. Like there's a lot to that financially, and you know, and I'm not downplaying people who do that at all.
No.
I'm just saying that was a road that I did not think that we would go down. And so I was like, if that was where we were going, Lord is gonna have to make it darn clear, because that's very expensive to do for not a guarantee. Mm-hmm. And so, especially when you don't have that kind of money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was
I mean, you
for sure. Well, and we were paying off debt. Like we were doing the Dave Ramsey thing. So we were paying off debt, and like, yeah, I didn't have 18 grand. I could just
Every spare dollar.
and we were paying off debt. Like I wasn't going to go
So-
18 grand further into debt when I was trying to pay debt off. Like
Yeah. Jason,
it was-
how did you feel when you found out?
It was very frustrating.
Okay. Were you like surprised?
Kind of.
Okay.
I mean, it was a little bit surprising. Definitely frustrating.
Okay.
Just, you know, thinking back on, you know, what we learned about the first surgery I had so many years ago. Like, is that what caused
Yeah.
damage type of thing? Like, is it just the way I've been eating all these years? Is it just, you know, what was it? So,
I'm going to go ahead and guess your years of Mountain Dew and fast break candy bars and Hot Pockets probably didn't help it, but you know.
I remember those fast break things. I remember seeing them at the store and getting
He
them.
was so
for-
obsessed.
when I worked at PetSmart, that was my break snack of choice, a Mountain Dew and a fast break.
Isn't any better. I'm not judging your teeth.
I remember sending you pictures of them when I worked at Meyer. Like, hey, do you want me to get you something? It's like,
They were really good though. I did like those ones. And we lived off of Hot Pockets for a while.
We know how much of a health food those are.
They're so gross now, but like, yeah. Anyway, random.
I was never into Hot Pockets, like ever.
You're not missing out.
You are not missing out. We lived, yeah.
Well, you get them 10 for 10 at Meyer.
You
So.
could. I know. We just ate Hot Pockets, Kraft Mac and Cheese, and Cool Ranch Doritos. We do not eat that way anymore.
I was going to say, it's
Totally
hard not
fine.
to eat that way when it's so much cheaper than the healthier options.
Oh, man. Yeah.
That's a whole other
discussion.
Yeah,
That's another pod.
I'm just saying.
It's true though.
It is true.
Okay, so you guys decided not to do the fertility treatment.
Unless the Lord was going to make it very clear and he was going to basically give us the money, like someone wrote us a check or something to do it.
Yeah.
Like I was very clear. I was like, I'm not walking that road unless you're like going to have someone slap a check on my table. Like that's it. So no, we didn't do it.
Did it bother you when somebody didn't do that?
Did it bother me? No, it didn't, because I think deep down I didn't want to do it, because I had done a lot of work on my body to bring my hormones into, balance and just keep myself healthy. And I felt like going down the IVF route would have undone a lot of that, because you have all those hormone injections and it's really hard on a woman's body to do
It's
that.
brutal.
It is. And I knew that, and I didn't want that, because I had just worked years at that point of just trying to make sure my body was healthy. Right. And so I guess deep down, I didn't want someone to give me money for it, but I would have done it if the Lord had said, this is the road you're going to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't hard for me to be like laying that down. Like, you're
Well, because, you're waiting for how long for your miracle, and then it's like any hope, I'm going to take it. You're going to jump at it.
Right. We were when we were looking into supplements, even that we were very iffy about, because we were like, that's not, I remember Bert saying like, that's not natural. Like I think we just pictured our miracle to be like, bloop, here's a belly, like type of thing, but like, you got to do the work. First, you have to have sex.
I mean, it does
help. It does help.
And two,
it's not just holding hands.
Yeah. And like,
Gotta make purple.
and like two, like you think because somebody said it or whatever, like it's gonna happen naturally to us, then it's gonna just happen, But we were apprehensive about supplements, because you were like, I thought we weren't gonna try anything. You remember you saying that, and I was like, well, I feel like I have peace about the supplements, because I wasn't even. He didn't have peace about that, because he felt like he was very, I don't know, like we were so set of it happening in a certain way in our heads.
Well, I think
we have to let that go in order for the miracle to happen, for something to happen, because you have this weird way, like, God tells you something and you just start imagining it's supposed to go a certain way, and God is like, hold up, that is not what I was planning for you at all. Like, yes, this is going to happen, but not the way you think it's going to happen.
Well, and I think with us, I think we mentioned that you mentioned this last time when we shared our story, but I had said I don't want to screw up Isaac by having Ishmael. I said something along those lines.
Yeah.
And he never talks like that, by the way. So when he said that, I took it seriously.
So
I was like, okay, we're not. That's why we didn't pursue.
That's why I didn't want to do the supplements, because I thought that was our way to Ishmael rather than Isaac.
Yeah. But we were talking about going in infertility clinic, and he shot that down and said that. Once he said that, I was like, okay, we're not going to do it.
Yep.
That was just it for me.
Yep.
But, yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of how I ended up feeling about it. But I went into it feeling like we're just getting testing to see if there is anything else, because I felt like if they can pinpoint something else is going on, we can pray for that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you need a word or a name. Like sometimes you need to name it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit more accurate.
And that was kind of where I went into it. But then it was like, okay, well, now I have this sitting in front of me as like an option, but is that the option I should be going down? And I was like, no, I don't think it is. But if, Lord, that's the one you want me to go down, make it clear, because that's not what I think it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And for basically the exact same reason, because I was like, well, hold on, like that's not what God told me.
Yeah. So your stuff boosted up.
I did. Praise the Lord.
And I was like, you are not coming off of that supplement until we have a baby. Like, you are not. Like, it's, Well, and he didn't actually. You stayed on it for a long time. But it was basically a multivitamin, essentially. Yeah. But it had, and there's some other things that Dr. John had him on, and you can you can literally research the things that help create healthy sperm. And there are reasons why there is action required. I mean, our world today isn't the nutrient dense world that it once was, with all the things that we've done to our earth and our food supplies. So naturally we're missing nutrients in our bodies, which means that things don't always function the way they should.
You mean they're not all in Mountain Dew and fast food?
No, they certainly are not. So there is that's where, the whole supplement world kind of comes in and stuff, and it can be beneficial because you can help fill in those.
Zinc is really good for you.
Zinc is a big one for men.
It is. I didn't know that until, honestly, you talked about it, but I also looked it up and I was like, crap, where's the zinc? Where's it going to come from?
Yeah.
And then you're like, here's your supplement.
Well, I think you asked me and I sent you the link of what we used. And there's lots of really good ones out there. So you can totally just go ahead and hit the Google machine and start looking, because there's so much information now. Yeah. And I don't know that I would recommend the one that we used then. It's mostly synthetic at this, and it worked, but there's whole food ones out that I would totally recommend nowadays versus what we did then. Yeah. So.
Yeah. For me, supplements, I see supplements as far as our journey being, for me, it was just, if I take the supplement, it's going to have, my count and quality, but it's overall going to, help my body, not like a pharmaceutical drug where it's throw off, something else and side effects. So for me, taking a supplement, that was kind of a no-brainer, really.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I remember you guys were kind of like an inspiration for us with our infertility stuff, because we watched how long you guys waited, and I was like, as long as we don't wait that long.
I literally was like, honestly, I was like, I don't know how you guys did it. In my head, I was just going through my head. I was like, Lord, I know you did it for them, and I know it's going to happen for us, but Lord, I don't know if I can wait that long. You're going to have to give me the strength to do it, because honestly, I don't know how you guys do it. Up to this day, I still don't know how you guys do it.
You're talking about years of supplements. Jasmine was giving up after
every month. I would want to give up. I don't know if you felt that way, but every month,
I did that. No.
Really, every month.
I was committed to the supplement.
No, not that every month, about
giving
trying. Yeah.
No, I don't think I did. I don't know. I guess I just had a stick-to-itiveness. I didn't really feel like giving up. There was the only point that I really kind of released it all was probably around year 8. And I realized that we had spent the first 8 years of our marriage
being us.
Being
us.
No, we're trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
That was our focus. Instead of enjoying kid-free years that we could never get back. And it was focused on trying to get pregnant, on trying to do something that we really literally had no control over. And that is really hard to wrap your brain around because we are humans and we like to control things. Yeah. We like to have it, happen the way we want it to happen. And so it's really hard to wrap your brain around going, okay, well, the Lord gave me this word, or even if he didn't give you a word, letting go of some of that and enjoying the season that you're in while you wait for the season that you want. And that took me 8 years to go, oh my gosh, oh my word. And so we went on vacation. We went to Colorado, and then we took a 3-week road trip to Nova Scotia and did a whole bunch of stuff in that last 3 years before we got pregnant. And it was some of the most fun we've ever had, because we realized
it took the stress off.
It did take the stress off. And it was and I'm not saying that we we were actively still trying to get pregnant and stuff, but it was and I'm not going to say it happened overnight. There was a very low point for me before we got pregnant where I kind of hit rock bottom. And it was kind of around Christmas, and I was I wanted to give up. Yeah. I literally wanted to give up. And this was right before that point, and I had a moment, I had a come to Jesus moment, basically. And I was I was in deep despair. So there was a lot of stuff that had happened in the church that hurt me. There was a very direct experience. That's a whole nother story in itself, but it was a compounding year, basically. And I ended up getting sick after that experience happened. And then, we still weren't pregnant. And so it was just a lot of compounding things. And by the end of that year, I was in a deep depression. And I remember just wanting to give up. And I was it was literal despair is how I how I describe it. And all I could see was like black. That's it.
Yeah.
Like it didn't feel like there was hope. And I remember in that moment of just crying and, being just literally laying on the floor, just wanting to give up everything. I wasn't suicidal, so that's not at all what I'm saying, but I just didn't have hope. And the Holy Spirit came to me and he was like, you have a choice. He's like, you can live in despair the rest of your life, but you can also choose hope. You can choose hope to believe something. And he showed me what that would look like what hope actually looks like. And like, I got this vision and I was like, holy crap. Because I didn't realize what I was like, where I was at. I didn't until he like showed me that in that moment. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I had hit this rock bottom of just not believing that God was actually going to come through for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, but hold on, like hope looks a lot different than this. And I wanted that. I wanted that warmth. I wanted that love. I wanted hope. I wanted joy in my life. I didn't want like this black despair, which is where I was at. And I chose that. And I realized like, in order for me to have that hope, like I can't keep holding on and trying to control everything the way that I was. I had to let it go. And that's when I came to him. I was like, do you realize like we've not actually enjoyed, just plain old enjoyed marriage for all of these years? And he was like, yeah, I guess you're right, and it kind of changed everything. So there was like a deep moment of like, I'm just giving up.
Yeah.
I'm not doing this anymore.
I have nothing to add.
I think there's a,
Because that whole process was back to, me not, feeling helpless,
Yeah.
at that point. So
I feel like there's a difference between giving up and then like also the other flip side of it of like giving it to God. There's like a difference between those two, and it can maybe look the same, but it's not. Like, I don't know how to explain.
On
the outward side of it, you would say, oh, like they've given up. It's not that we've given up. It's just more like I can't be consumed by this one thing, so I can enjoy life.
Right.
It's just
like holding it like the palm of your hand and like whatever happens.
Yeah, because I feel like we went through that too, where it sounds so bad, but I was very like, I'm ovulating, like let's do this, like I'm ovulating this, and it consumes your mind, your phone, whatever you're reading, everything, to the point where I was like, this isn't even fun anymore.
And that's all you see too. I mean, how many people did you see that were pregnant?
Oh yeah, it's all the time. And because I knew people were going to be pregnant, I would walk down the hall and I'd be like, oh, they're pregnant. Oh my gosh. So it was like, it was everywhere. So it literally doesn't, you're just, it's like, it's all consuming.
Yeah.
Becomes an idol.
It does.
And that's
a good word, because I never saw it that way, but yes, it is.
And so you have to come to a point where you have to give it over to the Lord, because he is the one who controls it.
Yeah.
No life happens outside of him.
Yeah.
Whether you go through IVF or you have a natural baby, it doesn't matter. Life happens because he says it happens.
Yeah.
And that was something else that I was like, okay, so it doesn't really matter if I go through IVF or it happens naturally. It's not going to happen until God says it's happening.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter what supplements I take. None of those things are going to make or break me getting pregnant.
Yeah.
If he says it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Now, I think that taking supplements are a smart idea if you need them, because they're going to make your body healthier so that you're going to have a healthier pregnancy or a better experience, etc. But I realized I can't control the outcome.
No.
And that was huge for me.
Yeah.
But it's hard because we're human and we want to control the outcome.
Yeah.
But that was really freeing. And so the last couple of years, I'm not going to say there weren't hard moments in that, but it looked different.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed a couple of years before we got pregnant with Finnegan. And it was like, I look back on that and they're really sweet moments. It's really special to look at that. And I'm really glad that we got to that point and could at least enjoy a couple of years before we had babies. I love having children.
Yeah.
And I am so thankful also for the years that we had prior to them. I still wouldn't trade that journey for the world, even though it was really hard.
It wasn't a walk in the park for sure. It was a lot of awkward experiences in that journey for sure. But it was freeing when we, just decided, let's just have fun, let's just not even worry about it. Let's enjoy each other just for the sake of being together. And let's just have our own adventures for a while.
Yeah.
So, just the relief of that stress was just.
It made sex more fun.
Yeah.
For sure. And you're like, wait a minute, this isn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it's not work anymore. You can actually enjoy something that God made to be good,
Oh yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like we joked about that. People would be like, oh, like, we're just really good at trying. But yeah, so the adoption, you brought the adoption thing up too before we started recording. So it was after that, because we had talked about adopting. I mean, back when we were dating and stuff, it kind of briefly been talked about, though he wasn't really open to it at that time.
Yeah,
I had always thought I would do.
You had kind of a negative attitude towards adoption.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
You did.
Is that because
He said some
you felt
hurtful
like it
things
wasn't
about
going to be
it.
your own?
Yeah, I had that feeling, and in my head it was, and I mean, this is sound really harsh, which because it is harsh, but I had the mindset that if I'm adopting someone else's child, I'm taking care of their problem. That's the mindset that I had. Like,
I've never heard of it that way.
right. So
I'm just really bothered me every time he said that.
Hey, I'm like, oh, okay. No, I'm
I
just
get where you're
because
coming from.
right.
I mean,
Like, I've
basically
always
picking up
wanted-
the slack for two people who either didn't want or couldn't take care. You know, obviously there's some extenuating circumstances,
But in a lot of cases, it's because of irresponsibility
yeah.
Right.
that happened.
I guess I never saw it that way. Honestly, me just because I've always wanted to adopt, but Bert doesn't. Bert has this weird. What is it that you say? You're like, I don't want like 10 years later somebody trying to take a kid away. That's his biggest fear.
my thing is like the mom gets her life together and then she's like, I want the kid back, and I'm like,
She can't do that.
well, you know what I mean?
But
Yeah.
he's so
They
paranoid about that.
terminate their parental rights and they are given to you, so
you know what I
they
mean,
can't take
like-
it away. But yeah, I could see how if you don't understand that process, that could definitely be a fear.
That's and I'm like,
I mean, that can happen in the first little bit,
yeah.
like in the first few months before she terminates parental rights. So, and that just depends on the timeline of that.
Yeah, so it's
but
just that's his biggest fear is like you invest in something and then the threat of being taken away. That's what.
I mean, you could totally invest a lot of money and still in that few months and like still end up losing and emotions and everything.
Yeah. Anyways,
But yeah, it was actually interesting because somewhere in that last couple of years, we had someone from the church contact us and she said, you know, she did a small group for like the high schoolers, and she was like, hey, we have a girl in our group who just found out she's pregnant and she wants to give the baby up for adoption, but she wants to give the baby to someone, you know, not just like go through like an agency. She wants to know, like she wants to do it different. So she's like, I thought of you guys and I thought maybe you guys would like to connect. We're like, okay. So we did. We actually, you know, met her, like she came over and we met her, and we met the dad of the baby. And I'm not going to say names because there's probably people who would know some of those names, but
right now it's just our parents, we think, that are listening.
sorry, we're still not going to drop it.
I get it.
no, I know. Don't say anything.
No,
Please
I
don't.
wouldn't say names.
Anyway, we got really excited because she was like, yeah, like we want to, you know, she was like, wanted, you know, she really liked us, wanted to give us this baby or whatever. And so we were like, oh my gosh, are we going to like adopt a baby? And he got kind of, I think he was a little nervous, but also kind of excited. I think that was kind of where your brain really started switching about adoption, because it was like, wait a minute, like I can see that there was irresponsibility that happened, but there's also a child who needs care, and they're not in a position where they can or should be taking care of this child, but we are. And I think it like changes your perspective where you're like, I can give this child a good home and I kind of want to, you know, and it just changes things. I had always had that heart of like adoption. I want both like biological and adopted babies in my home. Like that's just always how I'd felt. So for him, it was like a big mindset shift. But then there was some weird things that happened, and she supposedly miscarried her baby, though there's more evidence to say that she was never actually pregnant in the first place, and that it was like an attention grab to try and get that person back into her life. And so it was a whole attention grab, which didn't work for her.
Okay.
got weird.
But it drug us through the mud, and that was like super painful.
Yeah.
But it kind of sparked something, because I was like, you know, I mean, like we could at the very least start the process of adoption. Adoption can take 2-3+ years before you get a placement. So we could at least get the paperwork done, you know, get ourselves on the list and just see which one God gives us first, a biological baby or an adopted baby. And so that's kind of what started that process of like, you know, going through the home study and
doing
that whole thing.
you open up your life completely when going through an adoption. Like, you know, they will overturn every stone just to get as much information as possible because they want to make sure that, you know, you're good parents and they're giving a child to someone who actually does care. So it was quite the process going through all that paperwork and the home study and getting grilled over little tiny details of your life.
Yeah, I don't like that feeling.
It's
now that you guys are talking
yeah,
about that.
it's
Yeah,
not a good feeling at all. But it is also
financial commitment to that too.
there is a huge financial commitment to it, and I understand it. Like that's why I said I hated the process, but I also understood it, so I never argued with it because they want good homes for these babies,
Yeah.
for these children, and so I was like, I get it. I hate going through the process because I don't want someone looking at all of the nitty gritty, finer things of my life, including all the way back to how I was raised as a child. You know, like it.
Yeah, there's whole questionnaires based on, you know, questions revolved around how we were raised as kids and how our parents disciplined us. And
Yeah, it's just
crazy.
a wild experience. So anybody who's gone through that, and I guess foster care is even more in depth.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that sounds bad. I thought foster care was easier than adoption.
It's
to get a kid, not like
to get a kid in your household, absolutely. And the process for adoption for that can be, it depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But because you're getting a child who's been removed from their home for
Yeah.
some way, shape, you know, for some reason. So, is it easier? Like, a lot of people do it until they adopt and then they will be done because that can, you know, fill their family or whatever. But I wouldn't say it's easier in some ways and harder in others.
yeah.
And then it costs a lot less if you do it through foster care
yeah,
because then
sure.
like the state kind of takes care of a lot of the
Yeah.
financial side of that. But yeah, we went through, it probably took you another 6 or 7 months before you decided you were like actually ready to start that process. And we found an agency that we were, you know, because we went and interviewed like different agencies and like did some things before we found one. But then that whole process, by the time we actually sat down and like started it, it was like, 6 months of that?
yeah, it was, you know, all the paperwork and interviews, and they had like a weekly, it was almost like a support group that they wanted you to go to. So you met other people that were in the process of adopting.
But that was also part of your training because you have to go through like so many hours of training over different topics before you can like actually adopt your child. And so that group was like part of that. Like it was the training and then like the support group. And so it was interesting because we were at the end of our home study. It was like in the month of January, and they had come to our house to like do the actual home part. And then that like the end of January, we started going to like the support group meetings, and we'd gone to like 3 of them. And we went to one. So come February that year of 2016,
It was a Friday.
we were waiting for them to do their part of like writing up our home study. And my period was late. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. Because at that point I had stopped taking pregnancy tests. After a few years in, I mean, I was like
why bother?
this just, if it's going to say negative, my period's going to start in 2 days. Like it's just late. And so, you know, just, I don't want that negativity in my life. So
You don't want to feel disappointed.
yeah, the
Because-
disappointment is hard. It's like, you just know you're like, which isn't faith, right? But it's also like you're protecting your emotions and your heart, like from that deep disappointment.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know, it just was a way of, I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying because we went through the same thing. I hated taking pregnancy tests. Like,
Yeah,
hate is a strong word, and I hate it.
There
taking
wasn't
pregnancy
any
tests.
joy in it.
No.
Like the first couple times it was fun because you thought, oh, this is going to be it. But then after a few of those, you're like, yeah, no.
And don't waste your money on expensive ones.
Yeah.
Dollar Tree is the way to go. I'm just
If you're
plugging
gonna
that
do
in there. If you're going to spend a whole bunch on pregnancy tests, Dollar
Dollar
Tree.
Tree.
Like
Actually, I've heard
I
that
went
those are
so
more effective. Too.
yes, I went so deep into like pregnancy and everything. I even looked at like I guess the pink dye, and it's more effective than the blue dye. Like
the blue
the
dye runs and can give you false positives.
yes, literally.
I'm sorry,
that's
you
how
live in Facebook groups with all these women who are like, is this a positive or a negative?
Yeah.
And you're like, everybody's zooming in to look for the second one.
It's.
Did you get
I
those
went
from
deep in there.
the Dollar Tree, or did you go? Is that a first response? You know,
Yeah, I'm not joking. I went deep into my like thing that it's so bad that's how much you hate pregnancy tests and stuff. But anyways, yeah, Dollar Tree, way to go.
for sure. I never did the Dollar Tree one because I literally waited.
Yeah,
And so, because at that point I was over it, wasn't gonna do it, wasn't playing that game. I wasn't even tracking cycles at that point anymore.
Yeah.
And because I tracked cycles for like 8 years, and I was like, dude, I'm gonna sleep in and not wake myself
Yeah.
up to take a temperature. Like, no way, no thank you.
Yeah.
So for the last couple of years, I didn't track cycles at all. That was so freeing. However, I do love tracking cycles for a lot of reasons. So anyways,
So Jason knows
So-
how to avoid you.
well, if we're not trying to have a baby, but anyways, my period was late. And so we were just kind of waiting, figured it would show up, and like a week passed. And now we're going to like the weekly groups, and we got into week 2 and I still didn't have a period. And I was like, it's going to show up. It's fine. It's going to show up. But there was also this part, like this voice in my head that was like, you should probably take a pregnancy test. At this point, you should probably take a test.
Yeah.
And I was like, nope. Well, so we went to Thursday night group.
And then they called us on Friday.
Well, they did. But we went to that Thursday night group, and I remember sitting there. We'd felt totally a part of the group until that Thursday night, when my period had been 2 weeks late. It's that second week, and I remember sitting there going, "We do not belong here. Like, we are not supposed to be here." And I was like, "That is weird." We were literally about to get our home study like sent back to us, completed. Why do I feel this way? And so then it was, that Friday, next day.
That Friday, they called me up and, they told us, hey, we got everything done. You're approved for adoption. So we'll start, getting you on the registry, your lists, whatever they have, matching you up.
And we had to like put our book together and whatever for like families,
Like a
birth
photo,
months
like
to,
a photo
look-
album for families.
Yeah.
For,
basically tells your story so they can see.
Basically marketing yourself.
Marketing yourself, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, that's what it was. And then it was Saturday.
Yeah, I was
Decided to
like,
take
I
the
told
test.
him, I'm like, I really, because I realized I was like, I had a history at one point of low progesterone levels, and I realized I was like, you know what? The longer I wait to do this test, as much as I don't want to see a negative, the higher risk if I do have low progesterone and I don't do something about it, that I could end up losing a baby. And it was like, at that point, I was like, I have to deal with this. And so I told Jason, like, you better go pick up a pregnancy test. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah, do it. I want to do it for, first thing in the morning, because we all know that morning pee is the best pee to tell you if you're pregnant or
That's
not.
true.
So Saturday morning, and I woke up and I was like, I have to pee on a stick today. Like, so nervous. The nerves were just, and so I went in and Jason just laid in the bed, like waiting. And I peed on that stick, and like we just didn't say anything. Like, it was just very quiet.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything. And then like I watched, and it was actually pretty quick, that second line, because at that point I was 2 weeks late. So
Yeah.
that second line showed up pretty quick, and I was like, oh, I've never actually seen one of those in real life. And I was like, Jason, is that 2 lines?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And like we just looked at each other and we're like,
So that happened.
is this real? And then like
Say,
we
did you
started,
put that on your Facebook group?
no, I did not. And in fact, a lot of women would go and like take 5 more tests to make
Yeah.
sure. I didn't. I just looked at it. I was like, because I had prayed. There was a prayer I specifically remember. I journaled it out, and I had prayed specifically. And I was like, Lord, the day that we get pregnant, I want it to be textbook. Basically, I want it to literally be me, just like every other woman, peeing on a stick and it being and just being positive, not a false positive, not anything confusing, not hard to figure out, not requiring blood work to confirm, just positive. And it was. And I just knew. I was like, the Lord just gave me a gift. This is a positive. We are pregnant right now.
Yeah.
And like, so we immediately, there was no waiting, like went to the bookstore and bought What to Do When Mommy is Having a Baby, the book, and took a picture of our dog sitting next to that book, like
Yeah.
she was reading the book, and went and printed it and like drove to parents' houses that day. We're like, what are you guys doing? They're like, nothing. Why? Like, this is weird. Why do they want to come over? Because we couldn't even wait. We were just so bursting.
Yeah.
Like we had to tell people, and we were
Yeah.
calling all the people. Like there were several people who had been praying for us. Like those were people we had asked for. We knew there was a lot of people praying for us at that point because we've been very open about our whole
Yeah.
journey. But there were specific people.
Yeah.
And we like called those people and we're like, guess what?
Yeah.
And it was just like a huge celebration at that point. And at that, like everything was very textbook about that pregnancy. Like there wasn't anything like my progesterone levels were normal, because I did end up getting blood work because I just wanted to make sure. And it was like, there was one point when we went to Florida, when I was around, I was 13 weeks, I think, almost 14 weeks at that point. Yeah. So it was like just in the second trimester. So you're, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, you're in the safe zone. That's another story.
There is
but
no
like,
safe
there
zone
is no safe
anywhere.
zone. Life is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter from conception to the day that you die. There is no guarantee on life. Period.
Yeah.
So there is no safe zone. But like, there's this like, we have this false like, you know, security of, oh, second trimester, you know. But it was always at the beginning, and we were in Florida, and I started bleeding, and I was like, oh my gosh. So my family all went to SeaWorld, and we were just quietly kind of freaking out. And I called our midwife, and I was like, okay, this is going on. She goes, well, you might not be miscarrying. I mean, you might be, but without, you know, she's like, we really can't know at this point. And she's like, there really isn't anything you can do. She goes, you could take some vitamin E and see if that helps. There's a couple other things that could be going on, you know, because like your placenta could have shifted a little. And she's like, that would be pretty normal. And she's like, just rest and, you know, I guess just see what happens. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, obviously
that's
like
so easy to do.
Right.
So we kind of freaked out.
Just relax.
Yeah, just relax after all of this time. No. So we got in the car. They were all at SeaWorld. We got in the car, drove to Whole Foods, which was like a 40-minute drive. I didn't care. I was getting vitamin E. And as we were driving back, we were just blasting worship music because I was like, no, like I have to stay in faith that this is okay. And I remember I looked out the window and I just felt like the Lord was like, do you trust me? I gave this to you. Like, trust me that your gift is okay. And I was like, okay. And like, I just had this like peace come over me that it wasn't anything bad. I still took vitamin E. I mean, it wasn't going to hurt me. It was only going to benefit. So I was like, I'll still take it. We rested that day and like, I was fine the rest of the trip. And like the pregnancy was fine after that. And so, you know, when we talked to my midwife, she's like, yeah, your placenta just shifted, which is especially normal, you know, in like a first pregnancy like that, when your uterus is expanding and growing to house a baby, the placenta can like move, you know, to do that. And when it does, then it'll shed a little bit of blood and you can bleed, which can be terrifying.
Yeah.
You don't really know why.
Oh, yeah.
But it's physiologically normal.
Yeah.
So that was kind of an interesting thing. But everything else was normal, and Finn was born. So part of the way through this whole journey, Jason had a dream.
Yeah, I had a dream. I forget what year in the process it was, but I had a dream. It was very quick, and I remember it so vividly because it was almost like reading the headline of a newspaper, and all I saw in my dream was, you're going to have a baby 10-10. That's all it was. So for several years, I'm like, what is that? I don't.
What in the world? So we just kind of tucked it away, you know.
So I remembered it, you know, the whole process. And then when Finn was born in October, which is the 10th month of the year, and then we kind of calculate back when we first, you know,
started trying. It was
10 years, 10 months.
Wow.
The 10th month of the 10th year.
Wow.
That we had started trying to have baby.
Is when
Finnegan was born.
That's the movie. Really though, it really is. I mean, you know,
we could sell that idea to Hallmark.
Angel TV. Maybe they'll take our story.
I mean,
It'll be the next box office hit.
Yes.
I mean, when you think about it, though, seriously, I mean, that's so cool.
Yeah. Who knew that was, you know what I mean? Like,
I tried to figure. I thought for sure he was going to be born on October 10, but I was like, no, October 10, because 10-10. And then he didn't come on 10-10. And I was like, dude, God, what are you doing? Like, he was supposed to be born.
It's the time, 10 p.m.
But he didn't show up at that time. It was like 7:02 or something.
Yeah.
7:07 maybe. It's my 7:07. I have to go look. I don't know. I didn't care what time it was. I was holding my baby. But but then all of a sudden, like within 24 hours, I was like,
now you know.
I get it now. Yeah.
So,
That's crazy. That's cool. That's
If he was born on the 10th,
Yeah, right?
mind blown.
Oh my gosh.
I would say, what advice would you give to somebody who's going through it?
before we get to that,
Oh, yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a different question. So, you know, you had this whole journey and you said you had like the bleeding issue. Did miscarriage ever creep into your head? Like the doubt, like that fear of...
Oh, for sure.
Like, because you already had one. Did that ever come back? Like, did you think, oh, this isn't it? Like...
There was like that fear was definitely apparent on our way to Whole Foods.
Yeah.
Like in that first bit when it started and on our way to Whole Foods, and it wasn't until on our way back that the Lord spoke to me and I had peace that it was going to be okay. But I was pursuing the Lord in that because I felt that fear, which is human, and I felt it, and I was like, Lord, I am not okay right now. Like I am terrified. Like you need to speak to me because you promised, and here we are. Like what? And then on the way home, back to the condo or whatever, that's when he spoke to me, and I had that peace, and I knew the rest of the pregnancy was going to be okay. Like we were going to have a healthy baby after that. Like it didn't matter. Like nothing was going to happen to take that away because God was protecting us at that point. Like, and I knew. So yeah, gosh, I feel like there's so many little things I could say because like the timing thing, people ask too, like, why do you think that time was the time to have that you got pregnant? I'm like, well, I mean, I can't really give you a solid answer on that one, but the Bible actually tells us, like the Lord says, I want to say it's in Isaiah where he says like, when it's time, I, the Lord, will make it happen. And he told me that he's, cause I asked him, I was like, why now? And he was like, 3 times I asked him that. And 3 times he told me because it was time. And I'm like, oh. And that was also like a confirmation that like there wasn't anything that I could have done to control that result.
Yeah.
It was just time because all life happens because God says it happens.
Yeah.
So that was kind of. Yeah.
And then how much of a time gap is there between Knox and Finn?
Almost exactly 3 years.
Okay.
3 weeks shy of 3 years. And so Knox, funny story, right after Finn was born, I had this like moment of fear when he was born that he would be the only baby we'd ever have. But I had prayed for, I remember I have journals that I prayed and I said, Lord, I can't choose between a boy or a girl. So you're just going to have to give me a minimum of one of each. And I journaled that. Mm-hmm. And then I had Finn again. But then the word that we had was that we would have a child naturally. And so then he was born and I was like, what if he's the only baby that we have? And I realized, well, the Lord spoke to me and he was like, could you just enjoy what you have and trust me about the rest of it? And I was like, okay, I've got to stop because I'm not actually enjoying what I prayed so long for right now. Yeah. I'm like living in fear right now. And then, so I rested in that. And then, I didn't get my period back until I was done nursing Finn again. So it was 25 months. And so there was no way we were going to get pregnant. And in that time, and I realized like, oh, I'm going to have to stop nursing him to actually have another baby. And so it was Thanksgiving it was like 2 days before Thanksgiving. And I finally was like, okay, we're done. Like, I'm just done. And that's a whole nother story. But anyways, I decided we were done. And it was actually really peaceful. It was wonderful. And my period came back 2 weeks later and we got pregnant on that period, like that cycle, like that first cycle. Yeah. Like we just got pregnant and I was like, oh, this is how people get pregnant. So it was like,
It's supposed to be that easy.
Yeah. It is supposed to be that easy. But yeah, so that's how Knox ended up here. You just surprised us very quickly and it was wonderful.
Told her how old now?
6 and a half. Well, they'll be 7 and 4 in October and September. Okay. So
it's crazy.
It's crazy
how time flies.
And we're not done because we still don't have a girl.
So you're like, oh, you're hoping for that girl.
We are. And there's been 2 prophetic words and a dream that confirmed it. I'm not going to go into detail about that because that's just still private information. But yeah, so I don't believe that we're done.
So TBD with the girl.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that. I am, because it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like your story isn't finished.
It's not finished.
So there you go.
What was the question you wanted to ask?
I forgot. What would you recommend to somebody who's going through this?
Oh, so I think one of the first things that comes to my mind is feeling your feelings.
Yeah.
Because they're human and they're normal, and you need to be able to feel those and be honest with yourself. But you also need to be honest with God, because you can't heal in that process without being honest with yourself and with God. Yeah. And then remembering that you're not in control, as hard as that is. And obviously nobody can fix that for someone. That's something that you really have to journey yourself to understand that. But that is true. Like, you are not in control of that process. And to try, while you're on that process, to enjoy living still and not let it consume you. Don't let it become an idol.
Yeah.
And then, obviously following the Lord's leading in what he tells you to do, but also remembering that, like, taking a supplement or two it's not gonna hurt anything. It's only gonna help your body.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, if you need to go to a doctor or something, that's okay too. And like getting some support.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you don't know what's wrong. Just getting some answers is perfectly okay. I just lost my train of thought. It's just right there. Oh no, just also understanding that, because when we were going through the process, we learned a lot on, how the body works, not just from, a pregnancy standpoint, but just how the body works in general. And I think just understanding that, if there is something, going on, you don't know why you're getting pregnant, it could be both of you, and just being okay that both of you might have a journey to, improve your overall health, not just one person, not just the wife or the husband, it could be both of you working on it. So just being okay with that.
I would say that because I was telling Bert, I feel like, because I went to public school, but I feel like, like you go to sex ed, but I feel like it literally tells you about what your body, how is your body supposed to work.
Oh,
like,
sex
they
ed
don't
like doesn't actually go into any.
No, it doesn't. It just don't have sex and here are all the STDs. I'm
doesn't even
still
touch
through.
it. Just-
But like, I didn't know a whole bunch of stuff in my body at all. Like, I didn't know. Like, when I mean I didn't know anything, I mean I didn't know anything. I didn't know about, like, what is it, luteal phase and all this,
The
like
follicular phase.
any of that.
It's like a whole ecosystem that all has to be fine-tuned and working together.
So is yours though.
Yeah,
It's not just the
true,
woman.
but
But yeah, there is definitely. I mean, because if you're creating life and it's a delicate system that is miraculous and amazing, but yeah, it can be thrown off pretty easily. So there is a book that I recommend, and it's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. I don't know if you read.
one. Yeah.
It's really fascinating, and there's more books than that, obviously, but that one I feel like is a good starting point to learn kind of the basics of how a woman's body functions. And really, they talk about men in there too a little bit.
Yeah.
But it gives you understanding of like your cycles and what it should look like, what to watch for, and how to track them. And because it talks about like the fertility awareness method, which is, a way of, birth control without like birth control. And definitely there's several methods of that, but it's a good place. It's a good starting point. I feel like it's a practical book to read. So, if you're looking for resources, that's like a really good resource to pass on. There's definitely a lot of resources that could be handed out here.
No need to go to the dark web.
You don't need to go to the dark web. There's a lot of really good resources out there.
Yeah.
But
And also, I should have started this in the beginning, but I was so nervous. I was like, oh, let's just get into this. I wanted to mention Jen and Jason are what's the saying? Jack of all trades. You guys know how to do like literally everything.
No. Well, not everything.
Well,
You know how to cut hair.
Yeah, I'm a licensed cosmetologist.
And you also what is it called? Homeopath. What is it called? Your certification of
Is an herbal like medicine.
See. Jason knows audio and he knows how to do carpentry and I don't even know what else.
Jason's fault.
Yes.
Even though I did nothing with the sound.
And on top of that, you guys have your own website and sell
We
things.
do, yeah. Wild Faith Acres. Because we moved out
.com.
to.
So please go to that website. I really liked your because I've been going to your website. You do candles.
I do hand poured beeswax candles. So in our journey of infertility and having babies, we learned a ton about products and what we put on our bodies and what we breathe in the air and what we eat. And so I actually stopped using candles because of that. And then I learned over the last few years about beeswax and all the benefits that it does for it cleans the air. Like, they're amazing. So, and they're non-toxic. And then I also have just started introducing a line with essential oils to make the house smell nice as well.
Okay.
So they're hand poured candles there, and then there's some other handmade items.
So wildfaithacres.com.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Jason, what do you do?
I'm a finished carpenter by trade, so specialize in remodel work, kitchens, baths, floors, windows, a little bit of everything. If I can't do it, I got the connections to do it. I'm trying to build a homestead from scratch right now, so that's just been
It's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work. But it's rewarding work because it's, we have a goal and a vision of what we want, our property to look like. So it's a lot of work.
So can they reach out to Jason through your website if they want it?
Yeah.
If they want Jason to come do some remodel work?
Yeah.
If he's not busy.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, we got an explosion of work recently, so it's which is good.
So there's a wait list.
yeah.
If you're okay waiting, that's fine. We'll get to you.
Yeah.
You've done stuff to our house, so
Yeah.
We're
Jason
very
used to work
happy.
at Lowe's, so he knows all the tool stuff.
He did work at Lowe's.
Lowe's knows.
But he's
Jason
been
knows.
learning. He's been learning under my dad, who's been a builder longer than I've been alive in the business, and so he's been learning directly under my dad, who's an excellent finished carpenter. So he's kind of been he was in the apprentice position essentially for a long time. So
Yeah, and there's other guys I work with in the trades that have been in the remodel construction for a long time. So I've been learning a lot from them as well. So it's
he's gotten to be very good at what he does now. So
someday I'll get to my own house.
Isn't that the worst? Like whatever profession you do, you don't really want to do it like at home.
yeah, or you just never get around to it because you're doing everybody else's.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
I still don't have many pictures printed, and I was a photographer, like a full-time photographer for how many years, and I still am like, oh, I need to print pictures.
Yeah. But anyway, so I think that's it, right?
Okay.
I think, yeah. You guys feel comfortable unless you guys want to say something else that you guys can think of.
I can't think of anything.
I don't
So
think
if you guys
so.
have any
Well,
questions, let me-
Yeah, if there's anything else.
I just want to say thank you for
Yeah.
taking your precious time to do this because I know it's not easy with kids.
Do you have social media that you want people that you're okay with?
Oh
people
yeah,
having?
yeah. We're on Instagram. So at Wild Faith Acres is our Instagram, and that's primarily like homesteading and foraging and beeswax candles. So if that's what you're into, that's what you'll find there. And then, yeah, that's probably the best place to find us aside from our website. So
Can I say that you make food look good?
The food is good.
oh, there are recipes on the website.
They
so-
can be no, but yeah. So anyway, so thank you for you just taking the time because I know
Yeah.
that takes time away from your family and everything. So
Yeah,
and I really
happy.
appreciate that.
So thank you, Jen and Jason, for your time and sharing your incredible story. Be sure to check them out on Instagram at Wild Faith Acres and wildfaithacres.com. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week with another infertility story.